Hey guys, tonight we're cracking open one of the softest chapters in Roman history. No, really, it's literally soft. You find yourself under the flickering torchlight of a government storeroom, somewhere behind the Temple of Concord, elbow deep in a basket of goose feathers that definitely wasn't cleaned properly. The scent is a mix of damp scrolls, vinegar glue, and what you hope is just old lavender sachets, though it might also be pigeon. Welcome to your first night on the job as Rome's official feather inspector. No one tells you what that means. Exactly. Just that if you misplace a single downy tuft, someone's nephew from the grain registry will get your salary. You probably won't survive this. Not because the job is dangerous, though. You will get pecked. But because it's so absurd, so sleepy, so featherlight in its importance that your brain might just drift into sleep and never come back. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And feel free to comment where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the empire. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shift your weight on a creaky stool as a scribe with an inkwell strapped to his thigh mutters something about goose classification domestica versus ferris, which, you learn, matters a lot if the feathers are for religious pillows. Yes, in Rome, some priests get special neck rolls filled only with wild feathers. Apparently, Jupiter prefers a little unpredictability in his lumbar support. This storeroom smells like the back end of a duck. You wonder how many centuries of bird-based paperwork have passed through this place. Scrolls are piled high, tied with string, tagged in Latin, Greek, and occasionally a bored curse from a tired bureaucrat. There's a whole filing system for plumage, ceremonial, military, domestic, theatrical, and your favorite miscellaneous. You yawns, the torch sputters. The floor is gritty with old quill shavings and the occasional molted feather that escaped official counting. Your supervisor, a man with a face like hardened bread crust, gives you your first inspection list. You are to evaluate 16 pillow bundles, 3 fan clusters, 1 imperial shoulder pad, and for reasons no one explains, a feather-lined ceremonial goat harness. And yes, there's a form for that too. The job, at its heart, is absurd, but it's paid for by the Roman state, which means it's taken very seriously. Every pillow has to meet softness standards outlined by the Lex Lenitatis, the law of softness, which historians still argue whether it was originally written as a satire or a genuine comfort decree under the rule of Emperor Domitian, who reportedly couldn't sleep unless his knees were elevated exactly 2 thumbs higher than his hips. That measurement system, you'll be trained on it next week. Bring your own thumbs. You pinch a clump of down and press it to your cheek. It's damp, probably stored wrong, definitely going to mold. That means you get to stamp it with a little bronze seal that says rejected for imperial use. You try not to smile, it's the only fun part of the job. Your scroll boy, a sarcastic teenager named Gallo, scribbles down your rejection with a dramatic sigh. Third one, this week. He mutters, "You're going to get us reassigned to donkey blanket duty." You assure him you're aiming for peacock plume audits. That gets a snort. Somewhere outside, a water clock chimes. It's late, and the torches are starting to lean. You rub your eyes, careful not to get goose oil in them, it stings. As your vision blurs slightly, you think about what brought you here: an accidental fall, a spilled amphora of wine, and a toga that tore in the worst possible place at the worst possible time. But that's for another night. Right now, you're cradling a slightly damp imperial pillow, sniffing it like a suspicious sommelier. Is that mint or mildew? Possibly both. You mark it unsure. Recheck in dry weather and move on. Rome doesn't stop for dampness, and neither do you. A bat swoops overhead. Gallo screams a little. You laugh just enough to get a feather in your mouth. You spit. The job's glamorous. Truly, historians still argue whether jobs like yours were ceremonial jokes or vital posts in a massive imperial bureaucracy that couldn't sleep unless every part of the empire was soft enough. After all, the Pax Romana wasn't just military peace, it was logistical plushness. Somewhere in this dusty storeroom, Beneath scrolls and straw lies the true weight of Roman stability. Not gold, not legions, but stuffing. Cushions on every stool, feathers in every helmet, goose down under every senator's weary spine. And you, yes, you are the last line of defense against the itchy, the lumpy, and the underfilled. You close your eyes for just a second. The feather in your hand droops slightly. Gallo mumbles something about fermented bird sweat and falls asleep on a pillow you rejected earlier. You're about to scold him, but you yawn instead. Because this is Rome, and comfort is power. And right now, you're its most reluctant guardian. You weren't supposed to be here. Not in this storeroom. Not in this tunic. Not with a clipboard that smells like duck droppings and responsibility. You were supposed to be a wine pourer, a simpulum boy, an anonymous lad with a nice profile and decent posture, trusted to refill goblets and stay out of aristocratic arguments. But fate, or perhaps a slippery amphora of Falernian, had other plans. It happened during one of those lavish mid-autumn feasts hosted by the Treasury Office. You were helping a cousin earn favor, pouring wine behind the scenes and avoiding the gaze of the city prefect. But the floor was slick, the jug too full, and your sandals too new. One clumsy stumble and whoosh, half the Emperor's Reserve vintage poured straight onto a magistrate's lap. The magistrate screamed. You apologized. And then, as you tried to flee the scene, your toga caught on a bronze fig leaf and ripped in half. The laughter echoed. The silence afterward was worse. You thought that was the end of it. But the next morning, a summons. Not a punishment. Oddly, instead, report to the Department of Comfort Logistics, signed with a seal you didn't recognize, 2 crossed pillows and a duck's foot. Congratulations, you had been plucked for greatness. The job interview consisted of 2 men sniffing a pillow and asking if you could identify the region of origin. You guessed incorrectly, Thrace. Egypt. No idea. Still, one of them nodded and said, he's got instincts. That's how bureaucracy works in Rome. Now, months later, you're seated in the very back of the central records room, rereading the pillow, manifest for the 6th time this week. Your training scrolls are filled with phrases like ratio malus and tactus regius, the royal touch standard. Apparently, the late Emperor Tiberius once insisted on a personal mattress made of alternating duck and goose layers. They called it the layer cake of empire. It took 16 men to rotate it weekly. One broke a rib. Historians still argue whether Tiberius demanded it out of decadence or deep spinal anxiety. Either way, it gave rise to the Office of Plumage Balance, which eventually became the Feather Inspection Bureau. And now you, your instructor, an elderly woman named Verinia with a voice like sandpaper dipped in honey, trains you with terrifying precision. This, she says, holding up a pale ivory feather, is swan. Too stiff. Only use it for martial pillows or theatrical capes. You ask what a martial pillow is, something you throw dramatically during arguments. She explains, senators need them. You take notes. Then she lifts a tiny gray wisp. This is mountain guas from Dacia, the finest, collected only after the bird molts naturally. It's considered sacrilegious to pluck them early because of animal rights. You ask, naively, no, she replies, because the Dacians believe a live goose can curse your dreams if you take its feathers too soon. Right? Fringe superstition. But you'll remember that one later. You spend your first few weeks shadowing Verinia. She floats through the storerooms like a moth with arthritis, trailing silk and sarcasm. She shows you how to test bounce by gently tossing a small bronze weight onto a pillow and measuring the rebound. Anything below 4 digits, she sniffs. And we're dealing with glorified hay. At one point, she hands you a scroll titled Suggested Seasonal Feather Substitutes. Inside is a chart that reads like an agricultural poem. Spring, mallard. Dove, she-duck. Summer, pheasant. Cooled goose. Treated pelican. Autumn, late harvest gull. Pre-molt ibis. Winter, swan, if morning. Owl if available. And imported flamingo if very rich. You blink. Flamingo. Rare. Extravagant. Slightly cursed, she murmurs. Like good lovers, you scribble that down under things to whisper during inspections. Your first solo inspection is terrifying. It's a batch of cushions bound for the city's new senator spa. You are told the clients are extremely influential and always sweaty. You do your best sniffing, squeezing, even laying your head on one suspiciously warm pillow for 30 seconds. Turns out, it had a live mouse inside. You get a commendation anyway. Excellent attention to internal inconsistencies. The scribe writes. From there, things start to snowball. Your boy is assigned to track down an overly pointy shipment of theater fans. One ends up impaled in a chorus girl's thigh. You trace it back to a dodgy merchant named Marcellus, who tried mixing feather batches with barley straw to save costs. Classic Marcellus. You report him. You feel righteous. Verinia gives you a tiny golden pin shaped like a curled feather. Not for bravery, she says, for finally shutting him up. The days pass in a blur of plumes and parchment. You learn how to spot mold from 3 paces, how to distinguish between dove down and cheap bleached chicken fluff, how to fold a sample sheet so it doesn't wrinkle the report margins. One afternoon, you find yourself inspecting a pillow intended for the Vestal Virgins. It's unusually firm. Inside, a brick, just a brick, stuffed between 2 layers of cotton. When you ask why, the delivery boy shrugs and says, for posture. You make him eat lunch with you anyway? Seems like he could use a friend. Feather inspection becomes your identity. You start dreaming in fluff ratios. You begin referring to your bed as my personal archive. Your mother asks when you'll find a real job. You show her your golden feather pin. She sighs. You feel something shifting. The scroll boys nod when you enter a room. Your reports are copied twice instead of once. Someone tells you you've been nominated for the annual Comfort Excellence Award. You blush, then spill ink on your sleeve. Classic you, but still you've come a long way from that wine-stained toga and that snickering magistrate. You're a plucked bureaucrat now, a keeper of cushions, a humble defender of softness in a hard empire. And somewhere deep beneath the marble and the madness, Rome rests easier because of it. You shuffle into the feather depot just after dawn, sandals slapping the stone corridor like a wet fish. The storage vault doors are already open, which can only mean one thing. A shipment arrived early. Again, the scent hits first warm feathers, dust, and that oddly familiar tang of donkey sweat. Outside, 2 carts are half unloaded. One carries sacks labeled Numidian Goose, high altitude. The other simply reads stuff, which, in Roman shipping terms, usually means surprise. It's rocks. You sigh. Gallo, your scroll boy, yawns behind you. Want me to poke the sacks for rodents? He offers. You nod. Please do it lovingly. Today's task isn't just to inspect a new delivery, it's to trace it. You're not just the feather tester now. You're the guy they send when something feels off, which is bureaucratic code for someone is definitely skimming feathers off the top. And you've got your suspicions. Here's the thing. Feathers don't just appear in Rome like wine or gossip. They travel, usually hundreds of miles on squeaky carts, tied into bundles, weighed in odd Roman units like libra, sextarii, and occasionally just as much as Gaius can lift without crying. The plumage trade is big business, not silk big, not olive oil big, but let's say somewhere between wax tablets and decorative grapes. You glance at the manifest. This batch was supposedly sourced from 3 regions: Dacia, Numidia, and oddly Britannia. You raise an eyebrow. Britain is not known for its compliant geese. Most are soaked, angry, and possibly possessed by fog demons. Still, a job's a job. You tug open the first sack and sink your hand inside. The feathers are dry, slightly coarse, more like duck than goose. You sniff. Smells faintly like boiled cabbage. Definitely not Numidia. You pluck one out and hold it to the morning light. Yep. Trimmed with scissors, a huge no-no. Real luxury feathers must fall naturally, like wisdom or minor dictators. You mark it. Suspicious, possibly domestic, definitely grumpy. Gallo sketches a tiny goose scowling in the margin. The second sack is better, softer, slightly oily from proper preservation. You rub it between your fingers, not Dacian, though it's too pale, possibly Lusitanian. You flag it as acceptable, but geographically confused. By mid-morning, you've gone through 7 sacks, 3 scrolls, and 1 unsolicited lecture from a passing priest about the sacred breath of Juno resting in the down of wild birds. You nod politely. Mentally note, add priest feathers to banned list. Then you spot it. A corner of fabric poking from beneath one of the carts, tucked deep under the wheelbase, half covered in goose poop and imperial wax seal fragments. You yank it free. It's a private merchant's invoice, signed not by the official supplier, but by someone named Lucan Flavius. You've never heard of him. The signature is scribbled, but the word exclusive is circled twice. That's when you know this shipment was tampered with, or worse, replaced entirely. You set off, scrolls under one arm, Gallo huffing behind you. Your destination, the Feather Way Station, where imported plumage is first tagged and sorted before being redistributed. It's located, ironically, next to the city's refuse pit. The logic, apparently, was that the feathers would smell better by comparison. The depot clerk, a tall man named Spurious with spectacular nasal hair, greets you with half a loaf of bread in full disdain. Another audit. He grumbles. We already retagged the Iberian pigeon stock last week. You show him the invoice. Ever heard of Lucan Flavius? Spurious frowns. Sounds familiar. Might have had a booth at the Softness Festival last Saturnalia. Sold neck wraps filled with chopped cabbage and lies. Sounds about right. You reply. With some bribery, 2 walnuts and a promise to overlook his mislabeled duck shipment, Spurious leads you to a back room. Inside, crates stacked to the ceiling, each stamped with regions that make less and less sense. The longer you look, Britannia Deluxe, Goose Gold from Gaul, Phoenician pillow packs. You crack one open. Inside, straw and dyed chicken feathers. There it is, the core of the scam. Fringe sources claim that some merchants dyed feathers with crushed olives to make them appear darker, passing them off as rare night geese, a species that doesn't exist. Historians still argue whether the fraud was clever marketing or mass delusion. Either way, someone's making money. You report it immediately. Your scroll lists 15 violations, 3 fabrications, and 1 feather you describe as unsettlingly human-like. The case is passed to the prefect, who responds by increasing your department's budget and giving you 3 new assistants, none of whom can read. But all are excellent at looking guilty in a toga. Back at headquarters, Verinia raises an eyebrow when you return. Well, fake. Almost all of it. You say, dropping a fraudulent feather onto her desk. She smirks. Welcome to Roman logistics. The empire, you realize, is held together by more than roads and aqueducts. It's tied with string, stamped in triplicate, and stuffed with goose parts from provinces most citizens can't even spell. And now you're part of that invisible machine. The watchdog of fluff, the inspector of comfort in a city that will happily murder over marble, but gets truly violent when their neck pillow is too lumpy. That evening, you walk home past the forum. Merchants are shouting. A child is using a fan made of pigeon wings. A senator trips on his robe and curses at the sky. You smile, because you know which feathers line his chaise lounge, and he has you to thank for every nap he's ever taken. It's inspection day at the Domus Flafaria, the official government pillow repository. You arrive just after second breakfast, scroll in hand, tunic slightly wrinkled from last night's dream involving a collapsing goose silo. The Domus Flafaria is not what you'd call glamorous. It's a squat marble building hidden between the census office and a public bathhouse that smells permanently of onions and civic regret. But once inside, endless rows of cushions, categorized and cataloged by function. Sleeping, reclining, arguing, fainting, throwing, seducing, praying, and occasionally boating. Each bundle comes tagged with a wax seal and a scroll. And yes, there's an actual pillow protocol governing all of it. The law is known officially as the Regula Subtus Caput, and historians still argue whether it began as a genuine regulation or as a joke that accidentally gained legal traction during Emperor Claudius's final bout of insomnia. Either way, the scroll is real and absurdly detailed. You blink. You are, as always, expected to enforce this with your thumbs. The first crate contains neck pillows for the Temple of Vesta. You test one. It's firm. Too firm. The feathers don't shift when squeezed, they resist. You bounce a small bronze weight on it. It barely gives, definitely below the softness threshold. Gallo mutters, that's a helmet with fabric. Rejected. Next, a crimson pillow supposedly destined for a senator's debate bench. You fluff it. Better. Soft but not too indulgent. You sniff, faint hint of rosemary. Acceptable. You press it to your cheek. It sighs audibly, like a small, contented ghost. You stamp it with the approved for reclining debate sigil and slide it down the approval chute. Yes, there's a chute. Bureaucracy loves a good chute. Then comes the weird one. A round cushion, unusually plump, labeled for ritual feigning matron class. You raise an eyebrow. It's clearly overstuffed. You poke it and it pokes back. You slice it open gently, careful not to anger the stuffing. Inside, wheat chaff and sheep wool. Not a feather in sight. Blasphemy, you mutter. You send it to the cushion tribunal. That's a real thing. 3 retired scribes who spend their twilight years determining the intent behind fraudulent fluff. One of them once declared a pillow philosophically soft but spiritually rigid. You don't argue with that kind of experience. By midday, you've rejected 7 items, approved 4, and found one labeled experimental neck donut. Do not sit. Naturally, you sit on it. Instant regret. It hisses. As you make notes, a courier enters, dripping sweat onto the marble. Emergency review. Emperor's saddle pillow, rushed from the stable. You glance at the bundle. It's damp, warm, still smells faintly of imperial horse. Inside is a saddle-sized cushion dyed imperial purple, trimmed with what appears to be peacock feathers illegal for equestrian use. You stroke the fabric, testing its compression. It holds, surprisingly decent, but the peacock fringe makes it a breach of the plumage allocation decree of 27A.D, which, if memory serves, strictly limits peacock use to funerary fans and imperial funeral orations due to their unsettling resemblance to eyes. Still, it's tricky if you reject it. Someone powerful might ride angry if you approve it. You're technically enabling a class breach. You scribble, conditional approval. Pending fringe replacement. Suggest ostrich or dyed gull. That's the art of compromise in Rome. By late afternoon, you're surrounded by a sea of sorted pillows. You and Gallo play a game. Guess which senator each pillow is made for, based on size, smell, and level of unreasonable expectations. That one's Claudius Minor. Smells like fish and a disappointment. That one's for Marcia Licinia. See the faint imprint of her dramatic size. You laugh, then find one embroidered with a quote, Dormir est imperare. To sleep is to rule. You pause. Somehow, it rings true. Rome doesn't just conquer through legions. It conquers through cushions, lullabies, and bureaucratic enforcement of rest. That night, back in your own rented insula room, you lie on your modest pillow. It's not state-approved. It's not even symmetrical, but it smells like home. You close your eyes, replaying the day's inspections, sack softness, pillow politics, shoots, peacock crimes. And just before sleep takes you, you remember that somewhere in the temple of Vesta, a priestess will faint with dignity onto a cushion you personally deemed worthy. Now that's what you call divine comfort. You show up to the office expecting another calm day of fluff cataloging, only to be met with a scene that could best be described as ruffled. A half-dozen clerks are pacing nervously near the central feather registry. One of them is crying softly into a pigeon quill inkwell. Another is holding a pillow like it might explode. Did it molt? You ask. It testified. Gallo whispers beside you, wide-eyed. The prefect of soft goods arrives moments later. Flushed and trembling with indignation, he waves a scroll above his head like a war banner. There has been a scandal, he announces, dramatically enough to send one scribe into a fainting spell on a rejected cushion. No less. Irony's never late in Rome. Apparently, a massive quantity of inferior feathers goose-adjacent but not quite goose has infiltrated the state pillow system. One senator woke up sneezing. Another claimed his cushion whispered unsettling truths at dawn. A third accused the entire Department of Comfort Logistics of treasonous lumpy tendencies. It's your worst nightmare. A fluff smuggling ring. The prefect hands you a scroll marked urgent. Inside, a list of recent shipments, distribution sites, and a single note scrawled at the bottom in red wax. Find out who clipped the comfort. You're promoted on the spot temporarily, of course, to Chief Investigating Inspector of Non-Standard Feather Inclusion. The acronym is CIINF. which no one can pronounce. So Gallo just starts calling you the Fluff Hound. You don't hate it. Your first stop is the Sabura district. That's where the suspect's shipments were last logged. And it's also where most Roman comfort crimes begin, usually between a stolen mattress and a counterfeit lavender sachet. You start at a bathhouse known for its questionable towel quality. The owner, a portly man named Felix, who looks like he's permanently marinating in steam, welcomes you with a nervous grin. You're not here about the pigeon fans again, are you? You're not. But now you're curious. You show him one of the pillows in question marked Certified Goose Elite. He squeezes it, frowns, and mutters, "That's not goose, that's something sadder." He's right. The feather texture is wrong, more rigid, almost crunchy. You pluck one out and hold it up to the light. It glints. Chicken, dyed, possibly mixed with shredded scroll pulp. Felix coughs awkwardly. There's been talk about a new supplier, calls himself the Downfather. You raise an eyebrow. That sounds like a gladiator name. No, worse. He's a freelance feather broker. You and Gallo exchange a look. There's only one place freelance feather dealers gather, the Heiress Forum. A dusty corner of the textile market where the rules are thin and the stuffing is thinner. You head there after lunch, passing stalls selling everything from used sandals to unlicensed perfume made of olive oil and vague hope. The Heiress Forum is loud, overwhelming. Feathers float in the air like pollen. A woman offers you a back pillow filled with sacred doves. Another whispers about emperor-grade butt cushions. Gallo sneezes continuously. Then you spot him, a man in a stained green toga, with a neck scarf suspiciously puffed beyond necessity. He's hunched over a crate, stamping pillows with a counterfeit seal that almost looks imperial, except the eagle has two left wings. You confront him calmly, ask for his permit. He offers you a pillow. You decline. He runs. What follows is the slowest chase in Roman history. Through stalls of molting cloaks, past a cart of pickled radish, over a child playing with a catapult. You finally corner him behind a bakery, feathers exploding like a snowstorm as he trips over a jug of vinegar. Caught red-handed, or red-feathered, you confiscate his stock. Inside his satchel, receipts forged in bad Latin, a list of fake feather sources including one labeled Macedonian cloud geese and a pouch of purple dye used to trick buyers into believing the feathers came from the regal goose of Illyricum. Historians still argue whether that bird ever existed. Some say it was a myth started by a poet with a soft neck. Others claim a provincial governor bred them once, then ate them all at a single banquet. Back at headquarters, you file your report. The prefect reads it with mounting horror. This means he gulps. We've been seating the Senate on chicken. Worse, it means Rome's inner sanctums have been infiltrated by poultry-level support. Emergency replacements are ordered. Every cushion in the Curia Julia is stripped. You personally oversee the delivery of 200 certified Dacian goose-down pads. The Senate reconvenes the next morning. The session begins with 20 minutes of silence. As each senator tests their new pillow, one weeps openly. You receive a bonus, 2 amphorae of wine, a roasted duck, ironic, and a handwritten note of thanks from a grateful senator who signed simply, "A man no longer plagued by back pain." You hang it above your desk. For now, the smuggling ring is broken. Comfort is restored. But deep down, you know this isn't over. Somewhere, another Downfather is clipping corners. Somewhere, a substandard feather floats unseen into a consignment crate. And you'll be ready, because you're not just a feather inspector anymore. You're Rome's last line of plush defense. You get the assignment at midday, tucked beneath a scroll of imperial complaints and a dried fig. It reads, "Dispatch to Africa. Proconsularis. Inspect ostrich operations. Standard pillow compliance. Travel light. Feathers await." You groan, not because of the journey, but because ostriches. Rome has a complicated relationship with ostriches. They're majestic. Yes, tall, feathery, oddly smug, but also known for spitting, kicking, and once disemboweling a minor senator during a poorly planned chariot parade. You pack your kit. A measuring scroll, your thumb-calibrated compression wand, and a small bag of travel-approved lavender sachets. Gallo, your ever-unwilling scribe, brings his sun hat and a backup quill soaked in lemon juice to combat the African humidity. 3 weeks later, the port city of Hadrumatum greets you with sun, spice, and the overwhelming scent of bird. The Ostrich Guild of Africa meets you at the gates, led by a man named Balbus, who wears a robe lined with shimmering black and white feathers. He offers you a warm welcome, a suspiciously warm date, and a guide named Sabina who used to race camels and now yells at birds professionally. The ostrich pens are located outside the city. You ride there by mule, bouncing alongside sacks of feed and a very chatty monkey. Gallo vomits once. You pretend not to notice. When you arrive, the noise hits first, a chorus of low, drumming grunts and the occasional wee honk, like an angry god learning to sing. Sabina explains the basics. Ostriches aren't plucked. That would result in immediate death or disfigurement. Instead, feathers must be gathered naturally during molting season twice yearly, and accompanied by dramatic bird tantrums. Some fall off gently, she says, sidestepping a particularly angry bird. Others must be negotiated. You begin your inspection by observing the plucking logs. Every bird has a scroll. Every scroll has dates, molting notes, feather yield, and behavioral comments. You read one, bird Lesentine A. Bit Antonius, screamed for 3 hours, yield, 23 feathers, emotion, betrayed, reassuring. The feathers themselves are sorted by size, sheen, and vibe. Yes, vibe. That's not official, but even you can tell when a feather feels wrong. You lift one, elegant, tapered, clean, acceptable. Another, bent, damp, possibly weeping, rejected. Sabina leans in. Some sellers try to pass off emu as ostrich. From the east, you ask. She nods. They're sneakier, smaller, but smell more bitter. You sniff. It's true. A sour tang. Like burned pepper and dishonesty, you spend the day verifying feather counts, testing softness with your bronze bounce weight, and making a lot of very delicate remarks about bird temperament. You learn quickly that ostriches are not impressed by titles. One particularly large male nicknamed Thunderbeak chases you halfway across the pen after you gently criticize his plumage density. Gallo drops all his scrolls. A feather gets stuck in your sandal. You consider resigning, but later, over a dinner of couscous and heavily grilled lizard, Balbus tells you why this matters. The emperor's new cloak, he says, will be trimmed entirely in African ostrich, a symbol of Rome's reach, its softness, its feathery dominion. You nod. Dramatically, historians still argue whether Rome ever fully controlled ostrich territories or merely bartered nervously with the birds and called it peace. Either way, the cloak must be perfect. You spend a week in Hadrumetum. Every day begins before sunrise and ends covered in fine powder and bird judgment. You draft 17 reports. You reject 4 crates for vague shabbiness. You approve 8 with conditional grandeur status. And you personally bless 1 bundle of midnight black tail feathers bound for the imperial seamstress. You watch as they're packed in cedar crates, sprinkled with dried mint, and stamped with your sigil. On your last day, Sabina hands you a feather. A perfect quill, long and curved, with a single silver thread knotted to its base. From Thunderbeak, she says, his way of apologizing, or threatening, could go either way. You take it anyway. The ship home is slow. The wind is lazy. You write notes by moonlight. Your new ostrich quill flowing smoothly across parchment like water over silk. When you return to Rome, the prefect barely looks up. Survived the birds. I see. You drop your logbook on his desk. Barely. He flips through the pages, nods, then adds a new title beneath your name in the official Comfort Registry, authorized Foreign Fluff Envoy. You hang it above your desk, right next to Thunderbeak's feather, and every time you sneeze for the next month, you blame the desert dust. But deep down, you know it's the pride. The pride of knowing Rome now rests its imperial shoulders on ostrich softness personally inspected by you. You're back in Rome exactly 4 hours before the next disaster. The summons arrives wrapped around a half-eaten fig and delivered by a courier who looks deeply embarrassed for everyone involved. It reads, Urgent inspection. Emperor Caligula's neck support has failed. Possible sabotage. Prepare for awkwardness. You close the scroll. Look at Gallo. He's already packing a sachet of peppermint and a clean quill. There are easier jobs in the Empire. Ones that don't involve soft diplomacy and possible beheadings for pillow-based disrespect. But no one else in Rome has your particular combination of field experience, nasal precision, and soothing public apology voice. So off you go, through the marble corridors of the Domus Augustana, toward the Emperor's private chambers. The guards at the door barely glance at your credentials. Apparently, word of the fluff hound precedes you now. You enter a room that's part palace, part fever dream. Walls painted with frolicking centaurs, a fountain shaped like a grinning lion that burps lavender mist. And, at the center, Emperor Caligula, reclined dramatically on a golden chaise, clutching a mauve pillow with all the rage of a man personally betrayed by a cloud. This, he hisses, has injured me. He holds up the neck pillow. It sags, shamefully. I awoke. He continues, with a crick, I tell you, in a divine neck. You nod solemnly. The only correct response, you step forward, retrieve the pillow, and begin your assessment. It's definitely underfilled, probably compressed during storage. You apply the bronze weight, no bounce. You sniff faintly acidic, like stale vinegar. You squeeze resistance where there should be cradle. You open the seam with your feather knife and gasp, duck, not goose, and not even good duck. Waterlogged, limp duck, possibly reused, possibly from a toga cleaning rag. Gallo scribbles furiously behind you as you clear your throat. My lord, you begin, carefully choosing each word. This pillow is an affront to your vertebrae and an insult to softness across the empire. Caligula pauses, blinks, then throws his head back and laughs. You speak as if pillows have honor, he says. You bow slightly. In Rome, everything does, even fluff. Historians still argue whether that line saved your life or nearly ended it. But Caligula is mercifully amused. Then find me a worthy neck cloud. He commands, or I'll assign you to the Senate's footstool division. You suppress a shudder. The footstool division is where pillows go to die. You work quickly. You requisition 2 crates of Dacian down, 1 roll of Phoenician linen, and on Gallo's recommendation, a pinch of imported rose ash for scent. You mix the fill by hand in the imperial workshop, murmuring gentle encouragement to each handful. The result, a firm but yielding support roll, soft as betrayal and just twice as silent. You return the next morning, bearing your creation in a cedar box. Caligula eyes it suspiciously. Is it cursed? Only with comfort. Sire. He tries it. He leans back. He sighs, a real sigh. The kind of sigh that whispers, I will not declare war today. You exhale. Gallo faints quietly in the corner. A court eunuch proclaims, His Majesty is pleased. A week later, you receive a new title, Praefectus Cervicalis, the neck pillow prefect. It comes with a lapel pin shaped like a stoic goose and permission to veto any future emperor pillow combinations deemed emotionally or structurally unsound. You spend the following days inspecting every surface in the palace, chaise lounges, cloak hooks, even the imperial dog's sleep rug. That's how you discover the fringe conspiracy. In a rarely used guest chamber, you find 6 pillows lined with what appears to be trimmed peacock fringe. Again, it's not just illegals, it's symbolic. Peacock fringe is reserved strictly for oratory fans and deceased philosophers. Using it in neck pillows implies the user is both pompous and expired. You file a full report. You expect silence. Instead, you're summoned to the Senate. Turns out, they had ordered those pillows as a gesture of protest against the dictatorship of the Down Decree. They accuse your office of feather overreach. One senator even calls you the stuffing censor. You try not to be flattered. You testify calmly. Explain the history of softness laws, the balance of neck support, the fragility of vertebral pride. Then you offer each senator a prototype of your latest design, the balanced bolster. Half firm, half plush, ideal for those with unresolved political tension. By the end of the session, 3 senators have asked you to inspect their home bedding. One proposes a comfort subcommittee. Another offers you figs. You decline the figs. That night, back in your office, Gallo slaps a label on the filing cabinet, emergency feather protocols and mild dictatorships. You leave it, because in Rome, nothing is truly soft except what you approve. And Caligula, he sleeps better now, which means everyone else lives a little longer. It begins with an itch. Not yours, though. By this point, your skin is so frequently covered in rogue down, you're permanently exfoliated but someone else's. Specifically, Titus Pulcher, minor magistrate and full-time hypochondriac. He sends an official complaint scroll to your department marked urgent, unspecified sensations. In it, he claims his new debate cushion causes phantom crawling, emotional rashiness, and most alarmingly, a general sense of betrayal in the lower back region. You sigh. Gallo rolls his eyes so hard you can hear it. Your job now. Investigate the magistrate's mystery pillow. You arrive at the Senate Annex where Pulcher receives visitors. He meets you at the door clutching the offending cushion like it might explode. It moves at night, he whispers. It thinks, I hear it breathe. You gently take the pillow from him. It's slightly warm, lumpy, smells vaguely of time and mold. Not good. Back at the lab, yes. You now have a lab. You slice it open with your feather knife. The stuffing puffs out like smoke, and both you and Gallo recoil immediately. Not goose, not duck, wheat mold, and mites. You say nothing for a moment, then quietly press the biohazard ancient seal onto the table. Pillow mites are a known problem in the fluff world. They're small, they're rude, and they spread faster than gossip about Nero's beard oil. Most infestations begin when damp storage rooms are paired with low-quality stuffing, often smuggled or repurposed. But this case is different. This one's malicious. You find evidence of it in the seams, a cluster of old barley husks, and what looks like plaster dust. Someone has mixed building materials into the fill, probably to stretch volume, possibly to sabotage comfort. Either way, it's structural fraud, and Rome takes fraud seriously, or at least performatively seriously. You file an emergency memo to the Senate Cushion Oversight Committee, which was formed mostly by accident. During last year's pillow census, the committee is chaired by Senator Lollius, who once called a lumbar roll the invention of moral weakness. Still, he listens. Within hours, the investigation spreads. Audits are conducted, records cross-referenced, and then disaster. A delivery scribe turns up wheezing. He'd spent 2 hours napping on an approved cushion. His left eye is swollen shut. Gallo starts wearing gloves. Soon, you're called to the central warehouse. That's where you find it. A stack of cushions labeled for temple use, all sealed with the imperial mark. But the fill, rotting millet, a few feathers sprinkled on top, like sad seasoning. At the bottom of the crate, a dead mouse, a petrified plum, and what appears to be the business card of Lucan Flavius. Him again. You thought the downfather had fled, disbanded, perhaps taken up pottery or interpretive fan dancing. But no, his schemes persist, now more subtle, more fungal, and much, much itchier. You launch a full purge. All pillow stock across 6 districts is recalled. Feather supplies from questionable provinces are embargoed. Public sleeping lounges are closed for spiritual renovation. Sabina from the Ostrich Guild sends a mildly threatening note that reads, "We told you softness has enemies." Historians still argue whether this moment, known in some comfort circles as the Great Itching, was a public health crisis or a political theater piece to distract from a grain tax hike. Either way, you spend 2 straight weeks sanitizing every cushion in the Domus Flufuria. You invent a new ritual, the 3 tests of integrity. The sniff, for mold, mildew, and the faint tang of treason. The bounce, measured with your calibrated weight, now engraved with the phrase, justice has density. The shiver test. You press the pillow to your cheek and wait. If it stirs any crawling sensation, it's burned. One morning, Gallo runs in holding a scroll. Emergency in the magistrate's chamber. You sprint there, fearing a relapse. But it's not an infestation. It's a Senate vote on pillow sanitation standards. And you, somehow, are testifying. You stand before a half-circle of skeptical men in increasingly lumpy tunics, armed with charts, sample feathers, and a very graphic drawing of a mite. You explain the infestation, the sabotage, the barley husks, the dead mouse. You close with, gentlemen, this is not just about fluff. This is about trust, about the Empire's right to sleep free of treachery. A pause. Then applause. 3 senators begin scratching absent-mindedly. One pulls a feather from his sleeve. The motion passes unanimously. The Lex Pluma Puritas is signed into law that evening. From now on, all state-registered cushions must meet sanitation standards, undergo quarterly inspections, and carry a small medallion with your face on it. You request a different design. They ignore you. And somewhere deep beneath the politics and padding, Rome becomes a little safer, a little cleaner, and, for the first time in weeks, slightly less itchy. You're halfway through your morning fig when the memo arrives, tied to a rolled-up sample pillow with an embroidered crest that looks new. It reads, Formation of Guild, approved. Report to the Forum Rostra for the official induction of the Collegium Plumarii Guild of Featherworkers. Congratulations. You've made comfort a movement. You blink. Gallo stops mid-bite of his honey cake. We're a guild now. You nod slowly, staring at the tiny seal at the bottom of the scroll. It's real. Imperial wax, swirled gold inlay. Somebody, somewhere signed off on the professionalization of pillow inspection. By mid-afternoon, you're at the rostra, standing beside a group of people who look more like poets and retired bakers than Union revolutionaries. A banner flutters overhead. Collegium Plumorii, Rome's finest fillers. You were not consulted on the slogan. The founding members include a woman named Fausta, who makes thigh cushions for aging senators, a man who goes by Lucius the Lofty. No one's quite sure what he does, but he wears velvet and insists his neck has never known a subpar angle. And you honorary consul of softness, standing there with your clipboard and lingering anxiety rash from the mite debacle. You're given a ceremonial sash. It's itchy. The first order of business, electing a guild standard and official benchmark pillow to represent the Platonic ideal of comfort. Naturally, a fistfight breaks out. One member argues for the ridge-folded neck roll favored by military tribunes. Another demands the Ligurian head cradle, designed to support gossiping postures at wine fountains. You suggest moderation. No one listens. So you retreat to your office and begin crafting a neutral design. Not too plush, not too rigid. A balanced blend of Dacian down and ethically sourced goose tail feathers. You stitch it yourself. Gallo brings you tea and an unnecessary lute serenade. The next morning, you present the middle pillow. It is beige. It is humble. It is objectively acceptable. The guild grumbles, but accepts it. Democracy is about grudging consensus and mediocre softness. After all, with standards now set, the guild begins issuing certifications. They host workshops on feather ethics. Fausta teaches a class called Stuffing Angles 101. Lucius the Lofty offers an impassioned seminar on the emotional vocabulary of neck cushions. You begin drafting what will become your most ambitious project yet, the Rome-wide Pillow Charter, a living document, a guidebook for quality, care, and dignity in rest. It includes approved fill ratios, legal distinctions between firm, resistant, and imperially defiant, color guidelines for Senate-adjacent seating, ritual blessings for festival cushions, and a short poem about mold prevention authorship contested. Historians still argue whether the charter was a sincere bureaucratic masterpiece or a satirical protest that went too far and got ratified anyway. Regardless, it becomes law. Rome now has an official nap doctrine. Of course, with structure comes rivalry. A splinter guild forms. They call themselves the Cult of the Cushion and promote an extreme version of softness feathers soaked in mare's milk, pillows chilled with snow, even talk of live goose heat retention systems. You refuse to recognize them. They march anyway. At one point, they storm the guild office and replace your pillow samples with unsanctioned fluff. Gallo faints dramatically. You find a comfort manifesto written in red ink on the back of a sanitation permit. You remove it gently and order more locks. Later, while inspecting an amphitheater's backstage lounges, you overhear an actor call your guild a nest of neurotic birds with delusions of upholstery. You write it down. It's too good not to include in next year's guild calendar. Still, despite everything, the politics, the fringe feathers, the endless scroll work, you begin to feel something you never expected from your job. Pride. Rome now naps with purpose. Neck injuries are down. Public satisfaction is up. Even the emperor sends a note of thanks sealed in gold foil. I slept through 3 entire omens. Your work is felt. You hang it in your office, right below your honorary plaque of fluff integrity, awarded at the guild's annual Saturnalia banquet, where you also win, most likely to reject a pillow. Based on vibe alone, you're not sure how long this will last. Empires fall, Midas return, and feathers, no matter how regal, always shed. But for now, Rome slumbers better because of you, and that's no small thing. It starts, as most bureaucratic calamities do, with a knock. A junior courier, panting and covered in pillow lint, drops a scroll on your desk like it's cursed. You unroll it with the practiced dread of a man who once survived a flaming ostrich cart. By order of the Senate Subcommittee on Urban Comfort and Audit Compliance, all feather-based items within the municipal boundary must be accounted for within the next 5 days, including but not limited to domestic, ceremonial, imperial, theatrical, military, sacrificial, and recreational pillows. This includes travel cushions, even the ones that smell weird. There's a stamp at the bottom, a wax goose with tired eyes. You stare at the scroll. Gallo mutters, "This is a pillow census." You don't respond because you are already calculating. 14 districts, hundreds of households, dozens of temples, the Senate, the theaters, the brothels especially. The brothels, the imperial barge, the cushions in the vestibule of divine consultation that technically don't count as pillows, but everyone knows are just covered bricks with ambitions. You whisper to yourself, "This is madness. You're wrong." It's worse. The next morning, you and your team, now 10 strong and utterly underpaid, fan out across the city with torches, wax tablets, and an ever-growing sense of dread. The rules are precise. Every pillow must be physically seen, sniffed, bounced, and logged. Anything suspicious is tagged. Anything lumpy gets tested. Anything that hisses when pressed is burned. Day 1. You start in the wealthier homes of the Aventine. High thread counts, low complaints. One senator insists on reciting haikus to each of his 14 neck rolls. You nod. Gallo rolls his eyes. You count 72 pillows in a single atrium and label them all excessively loved. Day 2. You descend into the working-class Subura district, where cushions are fewer, firmer, and often doubled as weapons. One home proudly shows off a 3-generation family pillow made from compressed goat wool and unresolved trauma. You approve it out of respect. Day 3. You hit the temples. The Temple of Mars contains a single iron pillow for penitents. It smells like sweat and ambition. The Temple of Flora has cushions filled with dried flowers, beeswax, and allegedly whispers of spring. Gallo sneezes continuously and writes, "Technically not feathers monitor for ritual." Softness drift. In the Temple of Janus, you discover a dual-sided pillow, one half for beginnings, one for endings. You test both. The beginning side is glorious. The ending side smells like despair and licorice. You mark it as symbolically effective. Day 4 is the worst. You're summoned to the Imperial Amphitheater. Yes, that one. Apparently, the senators insisted on back support during last month's gladiator finale, and now dozens of combat cushions are missing. You crawl under bleachers. You interrogate vendors. You find a squashed pillow behind the lion gate with a fang mark and one shoe embedded inside. Gallo asks, "Do we log this as damaged?" You reply, "We log it as honored." Then comes the brothels. Technically, they're outside the civic registry. Realistically, they have the most pillows per square cubit. At the House of the Golden Fig, you count 114. At Venus's lap, you find 206, though. Many are in questionable condition and one is stitched with what appears to be poetry written during a sneeze. One madam tries to bribe you with a fragrance-enhanced feather sachet. You decline politely and inspect her incense-stuffed body pillows, which she calls dreamboats. You mark them as unorthodox but serviceable. By sunset on day 4, you've counted 31 pillows, rejected 117, blessed 14, and declared 1 possessed by low-level comfort spirits. Gallo has stopped blinking. You haven't sat down since sunrise. Day 5, the final stretch. You are summoned to the Imperial Fleet dock. Apparently, the barge of the Emperor's cousin, a man named Tiberius Minor, Lord of Unused Titles, has been refitted into a floating nap chamber. You board. You gag. It smells like brine, bird droppings, and failed ambition. There are 64 pillows inside, all filled with seagull down, unwashed. You write census complete. Comfort absent. Pray for the cousin. By nightfall, you submit your scrolls, all 86 of them. You light 3 candles, a stick of lavender incense, and collapse onto your own pillow, the only one that's never asked anything of you. The next morning, the prefect summons you. He looks terrible. The Senate, he groans, wants maps. Maps, visual breakdowns, graphs, pillow density overlays. They want a public report. You say nothing, because inside, something stirs. A sense of purpose, of justice, of data-driven fluff. Later that week, you present the first official map of Roman pillow distribution to a crowd of yawning officials. It features colored zones, labeled clusters, and a bold title, Softness by District, a comprehensive fluff audit. It gets published. People argue about it. Subura demands more support funding. Aventine wants a pillow parade. A street performer writes a song called Feather of the People. You go home. You sleep 12 uninterrupted hours. Because you've counted Rome's softness and lived to tell the tale, you're halfway through a much-deserved lunch grapes, a fig tart, and a cushion you swear is sentient when the prefect bursts in, breathless and red-faced. We need you, he wheezes. In Gaul, you blink. The province. No, he says. The political problem. A few hours later, the full story unfolds. Rome is negotiating a fragile trade treaty with a Gallic chieftain named Brennus, the slightly reasonable. Apparently, all talks have stalled over one truly critical issue: sleeping arrangements. Brennus has refused to sign any agreement unless his delegation is provided with pillows of equal or superior softness to those enjoyed by the Roman Senate. One of his envoys reportedly stormed out after mistaking a stuffing sample for chicken feed. So now it's your problem? You pack your satchel, certified down samples, linen swatches, 2 emergency bounce weights, and a bottle of peace-offering wine aged long enough to apologize for the empire. Gallo brings snacks and insurance forms. The journey north is long, bumpy, and filled with existential questions. Namely, can peace be built on softness? Historians still argue whether this diplomatic pillow exchange marked the birth of comfort warfare, the practice of using luxury goods to secure peace, or if it was just a very weird week no one wanted to admit happened. You arrive at the outpost just beyond Massilia. There, in a smoke-filled longhouse lined with fur and regret, sits Brennus. He's enormous, bearded, looks like a man who once fought a bear for its nap spot and won. When you introduce yourself as Rome's feather expert, he grunts. You don't look soft. You hold up a sample of Dacian goose down. He sniffs it. Acceptable. Progress. You're shown to the negotiation tent, which, thankfully, has chairs. Your mission: prepare a peaceful rest chamber for the Gallic envoys and convince them Rome respects their spinal needs. You begin with the basics. Thick mattresses of layered stuffing, topped with alternating goose and duck clusters for bipartisan buoyancy. Pillows are arranged by firmness level subtle, bold, and emotional support. Gallo lights a lavender taper. You test bounce on all 6 cushions, adjust stuffing ratios, and place a single plum blossom on the guest pillow for understated decadence. Then comes the moment of truth. Brennus enters with 3 advisors, one of whom wears a wolf pelt and carries a wooden bowl of beer like it's a scepter. They sit, they recline, they grunt in unison, then they nap. 15 minutes later, Brennus wakes up smiling. A Gallic chieftain, smiling. Roman goose, he says, eyes twinkling. Good. Loyal, slightly smug. You take that as a compliment. They signed the treaty that evening. In the footnotes of the official document, it is recorded that the atmosphere of trust and tranquility was enhanced by excellent upholstery. You are mentioned by name. A week later, you return to Rome as a newly minted diplomatic comfort envoy. Your office gives you a laurel wreath, made entirely of braided feather tips. Gallo makes a necklace out of bounce weights and calls himself the softness bard. Things only get weirder from there. Soon, you're fielding international requests. The Parthians want desert-acclimated cushions. The Egyptians ask for pillow pyramids. Even the Germanic tribes send a scroll reading. We'll talk if the seat's not straw. You oversee the creation of travel-friendly treaty cushions, shipped in decorative crates lined with cedar and inscribed with comforting Latin phrases like "in rest," "victory." Your magnum opus arrives during a high-stakes meeting with a barbarian emissary named Odo, known for throwing translators. He glares at you across the table. Then you produce the pillow, stuffed with triple-layered mountain goose, wrapped in embroidered linen and cooled slightly with fennel-scented mist. He lays his head on it, sighs like a man seeing clouds for the first time, and murmurs, "We'll take the grain deal." You blink, and history pivots. Rome's comfort diplomacy becomes a new standard. They even mint a coin depicting two hands shaking over a pillow. You keep one in your tunic at all times. That night, walking through the forum, you see something unexpected. A child pretending to be you. He's inspecting a stuffed olive sack and declaring it structurally offensive. You don't correct him, because in a world full of conflict, bureaucracy, and sandal blisters, you made softness a strategy. And somehow, against all odds, it worked. You don't hear the screams at first. You're in the middle of a pillow stitching demonstration, explaining seam-tightening techniques to a group of aspiring guild apprentices, one of whom keeps asking whether softness can be inherited when the first courier runs in. Pale and sweaty, waving a scroll that flaps like a distressed goosewing. Emergency at the Senate chambers. He gasps, "Feathers have rebelled." You blink. "Do you mean the senators?" He shakes his head. "No, I mean the feathers." 10 minutes later, you arrive at the Curia Julia and walk into chaos. Scrolls are flying. Robes are disheveled. Two senators are dabbing their eyes with lavender-stuffed handkerchiefs while sneezing violently. One man is curled in the corner, muttering, "I knew this day would come." Betrayal from within. At the center of it all, pillows, hundreds of them, piled, stacked, scattered open, leaking, swarming with something that definitely wasn't on the fill list. Mites, again, but now they're angry. The infestation is airborne, aggressive, and politically inconvenient. The entire upper chamber is now closed, and senators are blaming everything from Gallic curses to Dacian mildew rituals. You kneel by the nearest pillow, peel back a flap of cloth, and sigh. It's not even real down. It's chopped straw, pigeon fluff, and what looks like funeral shavings. You sniff. Almonds, which means mold, which means moisture, which means someone has once again tampered with the feather supply. Find Lucan Flavius. You growl. Gallo peeks over your shoulder. Again. You lead a citywide sweep. Not for him, he's probably wearing a fake mustache and hiding in a bathhouse again, but for his counterfeit fluff. Your team checks temples, spas, private homes. Within hours, you've identified at least 12 compromised pillow batches and 3 rogue vendors. One tries to bribe you with organic hay-based softness. You send him to the comfort tribunal. Then comes the unexpected twist. You visit a quiet insula on the edge of the Aventine, responding to a report of sneezing children. Inside, you find it, a single chair cushion, beautifully embroidered, filled with pure, untreated hay. Not illegal, not pleasant, but legal. You sit, you rise, you sneeze, the owner. A retired grain scribe named Julia says simply, "I miss the old way, before feathers." You pause. That night, it eats at you. Not just the mites, but the idea. Have you gone too far? In your pursuit of softness, have you alienated the basics? There was a time, after all, when Romans slept on stone blocks and called it stoic. Historians still argue whether the feather reforms of your era elevated the empire or merely replaced structural collapse with cervical alignment. You return to your office to find a letter waiting. It's from the Ministry of Health, not your usual audience. It reads, "Dear Feather Prefect, we have traced a significant rise in respiratory irritation to pillows filled with low-quality foul remnants, particularly from unauthorized vendors. There are reports of mild hallucinations, unexplained rashes, and a documented case of a senator shouting at a stool for being too judgmental. We request your immediate oversight. That's how you become an unwitting agent of public fluff safety. You begin issuing feather health notices. You co-author a scroll titled Down and Dangerous, The Hidden Threats in Your Pillow. It includes illustrations. Gallo insists on adding a cartoon goose and a plague mask. Soon, you're hosting town forums. The public begins to pay attention. Mothers ask what's safest for children. One gladiator requests battle-tested cushions for post-match naps. A mime silently gifts you a pillow stitched with your face. You pretend not to find it unsettling. The Senate, surprisingly, backs you. They pass the Pillow Purity Act, funding the inspection of every cushion in state-owned buildings. You hire 50 new auditors. A man named Vero develops a new test for mite eggs using fermented basil. It works, but smells horrifying. Then comes the most shocking moment of all. A senator stands at the chamber and declares, "I have slept without sneezing." This man, this prefect, has saved Rome's collective sinuses. There is applause. A feather falls gently from the ceiling. You weep, just a little, but the fight isn't over. Your next discovery shakes the entire system. A warehouse stuffed with forged seals, recycled down, and shredded scrolls used as filler. Not just any scrolls, legal documents. You find one pillow stuffed with a land deed, another with a broken marriage contract, one particularly large bolster filled entirely with poetry. You raise your hand, trembling. This, you whisper, is literary crime? You order the entire warehouse condemned. The scrolls are returned to the archive. One pillow is placed in the Museum of Comfort Crimes. It's displayed under a plaque that reads, "Even betrayal has texture." By the end of the month, incidents drop. Metis retreat. Comfort returns. And Rome exhales. The empire sleeps, once again, under your watchful eye, not just because you fight for softness, but because you fight for safety in slumber. It begins with a whisper in a bathhouse. You're halfway into a steam soak after a long week of allergy consultations and civic pillow reforms when a towel-wrapped man you don't recognize leans in and says, very softly, "They're selling pillows with paper in them, real scrolls, evidence scrolls." You blink, unsure whether he's delirious from heat or trying to convert you to a scroll-based cult. "Where?" you ask. He slips a feather into your hand. "Follow this." Then he vanishes possibly into the mist, possibly just behind the eucalyptus bucket. The feather is coarse, irregular, not state-approved. You hold it up and squint. There's writing on it, faded ink. You make out a word, testamentum, a will. Later that night, you dissect the feather under lamplight. Someone's drawn a line of poetry crudely using the shaft as a scroll. Not decorative. Hidden, smuggled. It's enough to send a chill down your spine. The next morning, you convene a discreet task force yourself. Gallo, a grumpy feather dyer named Octavia, and a former tax clerk who now identifies as a bounce consultant. Your mission: infiltrate the city's fluff underworld. Step 1 is obvious. Visit the slippery bathhouse. Known for its unsanctioned relaxation accessories, it's humid, noisy, and smells like citrus and poor decisions. Inside, you pose as customers. Gallo adopts the persona of a feather tycoon with neck issues, and soon, a vendor offers you something exotic. Imported night pillows, he whispers, silent as sin, stolen from Senator Dreams. You feign interest. He leads you into a steam-shrouded chamber where you're shown a crate of pillows wrapped in velvet and mystery. You press one, too light. You slice it. Inside, shredded scrolls, ink, Latin, names, legal documents, contracts, tax records. One marked Confession of Theft by Lucius Calvus. You freeze. It's not just a pillow smuggling ring. It's evidence laundering. Old scrolls are being destroyed, not burned. Not buried, but stuffed into black market cushions and sold into oblivion. Comfort crimes. Yes, but also cover-ups. Historians still argue whether this marks the first recorded case of bureaucratic stuffing fraud, or simply the most creative use of recycled documents ever committed under Roman law. You and Gallo quietly purchase 3 of the pillows and leave, That night, back at your quarters, you open them fully and read. One is an entire confession. Another contains a list of bribes paid to dock inspectors. The last is a testimony about a land grab conspiracy involving 3 senators and a man known only as the Feather. You bring it straight to the prefect. He reads it once, then locks the door behind you. This can't get out, he whispers. Do you know what would happen if people found out they've been sleeping on state secrets? You raise an eyebrow. They already are. Thus begins the case of the Feather Fraud. You're placed in charge of a covert operation under the absurdly vague title of Soft Integrity Auditor. Your mission: follow the pillows. It takes you from upper-class villas to theater green rooms to a bizarre festival known as Downfest, where actors compete in dramatic readings performed while slowly sinking into overstuffed beanbags. Everywhere you find hints: pillows with false seams, stamps slightly off, inks that smudge just a bit too easily. Each clue leads you closer to the heart of the operation, a counterfeit workshop disguised as a bathhouse linen supplier just outside the Esquiline Gate. You raid it at dawn. Inside, you find crates of scrolls, some real, some forged, bolsters stuffed with parchment strips, one reading pillow that literally whispers when squeezed. It's a trapped parrot. You free him, and then you find him, Lucan Flavius, the Downfather. Toga askew, hands ink-stained, face oddly serene. You can arrest me, he says, but the fluff forgets nothing. You stare at him. That's not even a proverb. It is now. He shrugs. You haul him to the tribunal. His trial is swift. The charges: evidence destruction, document concealment, pillow perjury. He is sentenced to public feather-plucking, a shameful but poetic punishment. Rome buzzes. The guild releases a safety memo. You deliver a speech titled The Moral Weight of Softness. It ends with, "Our pillows must not lie, not in what they hold, nor whom they serve." It gets carved into the wall of the guild hall. Later, you sit by your window, sipping tea. The air is still, the feathers are quiet. But you know now, beneath every cushion, every seam, every cradle of comfort, truth waits to be discovered. And sometimes it screams. You never expected retirement to feel itchy. Not physically, of course. Your personal pillows are the stuff of legend. Triple-stitched and filled with hand-selected goose down, aged like wine in cedar-lined boxes. No, this itch is something deeper. A quiet hum under the skin. The kind of restlessness that no amount of softness can soothe. Your name is now spoken in bureaucratic awe. Your titles take up nearly half a wax tablet. Prefectus Cervicalis Emeritus, Chief Auditor of Comfort Logistics, Founding Consul of the Guild of Feather Workers, and Honorary Down Envoy to Foreign Factions. You have, in short, done it all. And yet every morning you still check your old feather scale out of habit. You still bounce test your breakfast cushion. Gallo, now a rising guild star in his own right, sends you updates via scented scroll. New stuffing test fails. Chair exploded. Dramatic but educational. You chuckle. You sip honeyed water. And then one day, the knock comes. A messenger. Young, overzealous, wearing an ill-fitting linen tunic embroidered with a badly stitched feather, hands you a scroll from the Ministry of Urban Memorial Design. Apparently, they want your expertise for a new public monument. The Pillow of the People. A sculpture, a symbol, something soft to remember softness by. You agree mostly because no one else can be trusted not to make it ridiculous. The committee meets in the old guild hall. Marble columns, faint lavender in the air, a single pigeon that refuses to leave. They want input on everything. Materials, posture, the emotional tone of the statue's stuffing. You suggest quiet pride. They show you designs. Some are absurd. A reclining Jupiter snoring on a thunderbolt-shaped body pillow. A bust of you mid-sniff. You veto most of them. Eventually, you help them settle on something simple. A plain bench, sculpted to look like it rests on 4 feather-filled cushions. It will sit in the forum, facing east, so that all who seek clarity may first find comfort. You write the dedication inscription yourself, to the unseen hands that soften empires, to those who guard the quiet hours, to every pillow that carried a dream without judgment. Construction begins. While it's underway, you receive invitations to speak. temples, schools. One particularly rowdy bathhouse hosts a pluck fest in your honor. There's a public lecture circuit. 2. You begin giving talks titled Things Like Feathers and the Fall of Minor Dictators and Softness as Statecraft. A retrospective. Attendance varies. One day, only a goat shows up. You still deliver the entire talk. The goat bleats at the end. You consider it applause. You're also asked to consult on non-pillow soft projects, Senate robes, military capes, luxury scroll cozies for high-ranking scribes. You gently redirect most of these requests back to the guild, except one, the Clouds of Jupiter initiative. It's ambitious, ridiculous, and exactly the kind of vanity project emperors love. The idea is to install a series of heavenly comfort pods on the temple roof for visiting dignitaries, floating cushions suspended in netted columns, meant to simulate divine slumber. You're brought in as the softness consultant. You test wind resistance. You study seagull migration patterns. You veto scented owl down too crumbly under pressure. Ultimately, you approve the final design, a triple-lashed goose blend sealed in airtight silk, wrapped in light wool to mimic the weightless dignity of sleep. You don't say anything dramatic when the first pod is raised into place, but you do whisper to Gallo, now your official successor, clipboard and all. Make sure no one puts Lucan Flavius up there. He grins. He's banned from anything containing more than 2 feathers. Good boy. The unveiling of the Pillow Monument arrives on a breezy spring morning. A crowd gathers, people of all classes, children, senators. One man who appears to have brought his entire mattress. A priest recites the dedication ode. When your name is read, there is applause. Actual applause. Someone even throws petals. You wave, then quickly correct your posture. Feather etiquette. After all, never sleeps. You don't stay long. Instead, you slip away before the speeches end, past the statue, past the amphorae of mint-infused water, back toward the one place you've avoided for months, the guild archives. It's dusty. Quiet. One cracked window lets in a breeze that smells like lavender and regret. You find your old desk. Still there, still yours. On it, a scroll labeled unfinished. You unroll it. It's an old idea, one you never completed. A universal softness algorithm meant to mathematically determine the ideal feather distribution based on weight, emotion, and lunar position. You laugh out loud and start writing again. Because even now, long after the scrolls have settled, Rome still turns, and every empire, eventually, must lie down. The letter arrives just after dusk, sealed in blue wax, tucked beneath your door with the quiet deference only bureaucrats and well-trained cats can manage. It's from the High Office of Divine Representations, a rarely invoked department known mostly for approving temple murals and arguing over whether gods should be depicted with sandals. You break the seal, expecting a polite request to inspect a ceremonial kneeling cushion or approve a dove-down sunshade for a minor deity festival. You are not expecting this. You are hereby summoned to conduct final softness calibration on the Clouds of Jupiter installation at the Temple of Capitoline Optimus Maximus. The ritual cannot proceed until the seating meets divine comfort parameters. You blink. They want you to inspect Jupiter's clouds, not metaphorically, literally. The priests have commissioned a floating platform, suspended by pulleys, layered in shimmering white silk and filled with triple-treated down. It's a throne, a spectacle, a symbol of Rome's greatness. Divine rest as imperial statement. But Jupiter, the god of thunder, king of Olympus, doesn't just sit on any cushion. He demands perfect softness. You arrive at the temple just before midnight. The marble gleams in torchlight. The air is thick with incense, ozone, and the faint hum of a ceremonial indecision. The high priest greets you in full regalia, sandals squeaking. We've triple-checked the symmetry, balanced the celestial padding, but something is off. He gestures toward the platform. You approach. It floats gently, suspended by golden ropes, swaying ever so slightly like a thought not yet spoken. The cushions are enormous white, embroidered with thunderbolts, stuffed so generously they practically breathe. You kneel. You test. You feel it's too much, too plush, too indulgent. It swallows you in softness, but leaves no resistance, no sense of power. It is the pillow equivalent of flattery pleasant, but hollow. You step back and clear your throat. Jupiter is a god of storms. You say, he needs a throne that yields. Yes, but also returns. The cloud must push back, just slightly. The priests stare. One faints. You call for a reblend. 2 parts goose, 1 part swan. A whisper of eagle. For pride. You mix in firmer side panels ground ibex wool, wrapped in snow-dried linen, and adjust the stitching to force a slight upward pressure, like a cloud just before lightning forms. When it's done, you press your palm to the seat. It doesn't sink. It responds. You nod. The high priest tests it. He sighs. It is righteous. The ceremony proceeds. Trumpets, chanting, a thunderous recitation of the divine sleep rites. And at the height of it all, the throne is raised into the rotunda, bathed in golden light, resting in perfect silence. Jupiter's cloud, calibrated by you. Later, as you descend the temple steps, the stars sharp above the forum, Gallo meets you with a scroll. No emergencies. He says, just a message. You open it. It's unsigned. Just a single line. When we forget the softness of the sky, remind us. You don't know who sent it. You don't need to. You walk through the city, past sleeping guards and flickering braziers, past villas and gutters, past monuments carved in marble, and dreams held together by string. And everywhere, pillows, on windowsills, in doorways, under arms, in cradles, your legacy, not of conquest, not of fire, but of softness, of care, of rest. You return home, slide out of your sandals, pull back the sheet, and settle into the one pillow you never tested, the one that simply feels right. And there, just as sleep begins to gather you in its arms like an old friend, you whisper to the dark. It was never just feathers. It was peace. It was purpose. It was Rome. The city is quiet now. Even the pigeons have gone still, tucked beneath archways, their feathers rising and falling like breathing cobblestones. The torches burn lower, their flames sighing softly against the cool marble. And you've done enough. The scrolls are written. The seams are stitched. The softness has been measured, tested not just by weight and thumb, but by centuries of tired hands, bent backs, and restless minds. You've given Rome the gift it didn't know it needed. The right to sleep in safety, the luxury of stillness, a kind of peace that doesn't shout from a chariot, but settles in quietly beneath a head and says, you can let go now. So rest. Let your breath slow. Let your limbs remember the curve of quiet. There are no more inspections tonight. No feathers to pluck. No scrolls to sign. Only you and the night and the hush of a city suspended between dreams. You may hear the faint rustle of silk, the gentle thud of a weight settling into its corner, perhaps even the whisper of your own name, carried on a breeze that moves only through the oldest halls, the places where comfort lingers long after memory fades. And if you do, smile, because you were part of that. Sleep well now, dear listener. The empire will wait.